Hello and welcome everyone. Today in this episode, we're going to talk to you about the extraordinary destiny of Ramon Olorunwa Abbas, a formidable Nigerian scammer better known by the nickname Hushpuppi. You'll see how this young man from extremely poor origins managed to amass a colossal fortune by scamming people on the internet, and most importantly, how he was able to evade the clutches of justice for so long. Ramon Olorunwa Abbas was born on October 11, 1982, in a very disadvantaged neighborhood in the outskirts of Lagos, Nigeria. His father was a taxi driver and his mother worked as a vegetable seller at the Olajojo market, but even with both of their incomes combined, the Abbas family struggled to make ends meet. Little Ramon grew up at the edge of poverty, and very early on, he was forced to drop out of school and go to work to help his parents pay their bills. The young boy then helped his mother in the market, learning in the process the ins and outs of trade and commercial techniques from other merchants and traders. As he grew older, young Ramon decided to go into business for himself by opening a small shop selling second-hand clothes, a rather lucrative market that could bring in big profits, provided the seller had a taste for fashion and knew how to spot good deals when they arose. After his days as a seller, Ramon often headed to a cyber cafe in his neighborhood to relax by surfing the internet. At first, his online activity was completely innocent, as he only accessed sites to get information, read, or watch images and videos. But very quickly, he realized that the internet could also be used to communicate with people from around the world, without any barriers or limits, and especially without revealing his own personal identity. Young Ramon thus discovered that he could impersonate almost anyone, and this opened up quite tempting prospects, to be honest. Because the young boy had already heard of the Yahoo Boys, as they were called in the country, young people who were amassing fortunes by scamming people on the internet. Previously, he had never understood how they managed to make so much money, but now that he knew the ins and outs of the internet, everything became clearer to him. Indeed, all he had to do was assume a false identity, preferably that of a young white woman with dream measurements, and impersonate this person to scam love-struck suitors. In essence, it was a love scam, and it turned out that young Ramon was quite skilled at it. All he had to do was come across a man or woman of a certain age, usually sensitive, fragile, and especially very naive characters, who could easily fall into his trap. Once he had his victim, Ramon wouldn't let go, and the victim would soon find themselves sending him considerable sums of money via Western Union or international transfer. Some people eventually caught on and stopped sending money, but others, more gullible, continued tirelessly until they were completely ruined. During a very short period, Ramon made a huge amount of money, but he never had enough and always wanted more. The idea of expanding his scamming activities to multiply his earnings then germinated in his mind, but to do so, he would have to take it to another level. Ramon had already heard of a small network of Nigerian scammers that was taking shape in Malaysia, specifically in the capital, Kuala Lumpur. So, he flew towards the Asian continent and quickly established himself in the scene, notably thanks to his charisma and his scamming talents. He indeed developed a foolproof technique that would inspire an entire generation of Nigerian scammers: phishing. Ramon managed to retrieve data about a person, including their confidential information, such as their email address and password. The scammer then sends a message to all of the victim's contacts, explaining that they are supposedly in financial difficulty and in urgent need of money. Those who fall for this trap then make transfers, believing they are helping their friend, but in reality, the funds land directly in Ramon's accounts. Thanks to this method, Ramon Olorunwa Abbas would be able to scam more than 2 million victims in Europe alone with impunity, amassing astronomical sums in the process. After growing up in the darkest poverty, the young man had now become a millionaire, and even though the source of his fortune was highly questionable, he couldn't care less and only worried about one thing: how to spend all that money. And it must be said that he spared no expense, leading a true life of luxury where extreme luxury and extravagance intertwined. And when he took vacations in his home country Nigeria, Ramon spent so much money that it raised doubts and suspicions about the origin of his fortune. He claimed that he had made his fortune in real estate in Malaysia and that he actually owned several companies in that country. But his family and friends knew full well that he was involved in shady business, although only his mother ultimately reproached him for choosing this criminal path. The others couldn't say anything, especially since they were benefiting from Ramon's generosity, as he knew how to be generous towards his loved ones. The scammer-turned-millionaire didn't hesitate to buy the services and loyalty of those who were willing to be his accomplices in crime. Thanks to generous bribes, he managed to secure the loyalty of several high-ranking Nigerian police officers, as well as other influential people who could help him manage all his dealings. Because Ramon had managed to build an entire empire dedicated to fraud, and its ramifications extended across the entire planet. In 2017, the wealthy Yahoo boy decided to move to Dubai, a dream destination for a scammer like him, with its abundance of wealthy people it harbors. Indeed, after spending years scamming ordinary people out of small sums while building a substantial fortune, Ramon decided it was time to go after bigger prey. So, it was a completely different Ramon who arrived in the United Arab Emirates, a Ramon who wasn't afraid to display the downright indecent luxury in which he lived. He now took on the nickname Hushpuppi and showcased on Instagram photos revealing his princely lifestyle, his collection of vintage cars, and his designer clothes. His 2 million plus followers on Instagram could thus passionately follow the daily life of this young golden boy, who collected Rolls Royces and Bentleys and spent luxurious vacations in the Maldives or Greece. Of course, none of his followers knew the true source of his fortune, thinking that Hushpuppi was just an honest entrepreneur who had made his fortune in real estate in Dubai. Indeed, no one suspected that behind this colorful character lurked one of the most prolific and certainly one of the most dangerous scammers on the planet. Because when he moved to Dubai, Hushpuppi had teamed up with a gang of ruthless North Korean hackers, with whom he would scam a little over $12 million from a Maltese bank. This successful operation would lead to an even larger and bolder scam attempt, as Ramon sought to extort over $250 million from English football clubs. The plan was simple and relied on BEC or business email compromise, a highly effective technique that involved sending fake emails to companies pretending to be their suppliers, and then asking them to make payments to new bank accounts. As you can well understand, these money transfers would land directly in Ramon and his North Korean accomplices' offshore accounts. But fortunately for the English clubs targeted by the scam, the British bank that was supposed to make the transaction eventually blocked it at the very last moment. The bankers had indeed realized that something fishy was going on and halted the transfers, much to Hushpuppi's dismay, who had thought he could hit the jackpot in this deal. This failure would mark the beginning of the Nigerian scammer's downfall, who, despite being at the head of immense wealth, continued to devise scam schemes to enrich himself further. Hushpuppi's major flaw was that he had eyes bigger than his stomach, and his second vice was his damned habit of flaunting his wealth on Instagram, even though his fortune was built on criminal activities. It was decidedly these two flaws that would spell doom for the Nigerian scammer and would ultimately lead him and his empire to an irreversible downfall. With his insatiable greed still intact, Hushpuppi decided to scam several American citizens, including a prominent New York law firm. The amount of money swindled was so substantial that a joint federal investigation was launched between the FBI and Interpol. The federal agents wasted no time tracing the trail back to Ramon, but they lacked the evidence to act. Ironically, it would be the Nigerian scammer himself who would provide them with the evidence, and in the dumbest way possible. After devising hundreds of schemes over the years to launder his money and evade the clutches of justice, Hushpuppi would be caught in the most stupid way: Instagram. Yes, by continuing to post his photos of luxurious life, he ended up getting caught because in one of these posts, he simply forgot to conceal his email address. The FBI and Interpol investigators were then able to access his credentials from Apple and Facebook, as well as all the confidential data related to him. It didn't take much for an international warrant to be issued against Ramon, and in June 2020, the FBI, assisted by the Dubai police, proceeded to arrest him in his ultra-luxurious home. During the raid, over $40 million in cash were found, along with 21 computers, 47 phones, 13 luxury cars, as well as several small briefcases bursting with bills. Investigators also seized hundreds of thousands of fraudulent emails intended for potential victims, as well as dozens of storage devices, the contents of which were linked to Ramon and his accomplices' large-scale scamming activities. The king of internet scamming and the Yahoo boys had fallen, and his entire empire had collapsed with him. Extradited to the United States to stand trial, Hushpuppi faced up to 20 years in prison on charges of money laundering and organized fraud. He was eventually sentenced in 2022 to 11 years in federal prison, which he is currently serving. He will only be released in 2033 and will be immediately extradited to his home country, Nigeria, where he may finally reunite with his family, if they still want him among them.